Timothy Jackson Drake, the Cindy Brady of Batman's crime-fighting sidekicks, a young boy defined primarily by his detective skills and his insight into the holistic good and kindness that provides the need for a Robin, that Batman can't exist without. But unlike the Robins that came before him, Tim had a slightly different claim to the cape, for he was not chosen or made Robin. Instead, in his own words, "I'm still here, Bruce. I can't move or talk or see, but I can hear you. And you know what? You never made me Robin. I made myself." Resolute to this belief, Tim would go on to be, in many eyes, one of the best Robins. But why are we talking about Robin? Well, the short answer is I just got done reading the entire Robin solo run. Yes, all 183 issues, plus all the annuals, plus all the event comic books, and I've got some thoughts. Thoughts specifically about how Tim Drake's run on Robin and the introspection that Chuck Dixon and many writers used to create a young adult story in conversation with superhero genre work at the time, and even more specifically, what makes a Robin? What makes the better half of Batman? Also, I'm aware I haven't posted in a while. I've been producing a podcast, and I didn't want to force my co-host to read 183 issues of a run that I know fluctuates in quality. So, if you're interested in more contemporary superhero analysis, then I would recommend go give our podcast Champion Casters a try. Anyway, I know for Heroes Now, being self-referential is basically the mindset the Marvel Cinematic Universe used to keep making profits. If every single story is telling one long-form narrative, then the next movie justifies the previous, even if the quality between them is severely lacking. You wouldn't want to miss out on that sweet emotional catharsis of an offhanded remark in the next movie because you only watched the previous movie once. And while that same type of motivation has always been used by any long-form corporate media, I do think that this one specific run of Robin, there's a particular version of self-introspection happening. One that was used to greater effect to bolster the identity of Robin, and specifically Tim Drake, and ensure that he became a Robin in leagues with his older brother Dick Grayson, because it forced writers to reevaluate and understand the need for a sidekick, and coincidentally the benefits of telling a story from a youthful perspective, but not one told in a vacuum. So for a bit of background for non-comic nerds, Tim Drake appeared on the scene in 1989 after the death of the second Robin, Jason Todd. And while the history around it is messy, essentially in a trap set by the Joker, Jason Todd was killed because of a phone poll, with fans not believing that writers would commit to such a decision, and due to Jason's mixed popularity, the majority of them voted for Batman to fail to save Jason. And so, the infamous storyline Death in the Family was created. Readers were shocked, and in hindsight, it's remembered as a tasteless decision by writers at the time. The history, of course, is a little bit more complicated with retcons and Infinite Crisis and a whole bunch of reboots, but this isn't a video about Jason. The point is that for nearly 40 years, 1940 to 1980, Batman had Dick Grayson, the quipping and lighthearted Robin who embodied all the traits of the Boywonder, and then we have Jason Todd, an angry, frustrated kid who was only Robin for about 5 years before his death, which would lead Batman down an even darker path, one that required the aid of a new Robin. And so enters Tim Drake, a boy with a kind demeanor and no combat skills, but pointed insight. From his own deductions and research, he uncovers the identity of Dick Grayson and then Bruce Wayne. But instead of going to the presses, Tim pauses and sees the current state of Batman, someone growing more violent, and realizes that without Robin, Batman lacks compassion, and thus summarizes, Batman must have a Robin. He tries to convince Dick to take the mantle again, but he refuses, saying he's grown past Batman. And so, with no other option, Tim takes it upon himself to become Robin. But a hero taking in a new sidekick isn't anything novel, we've seen that plenty of times, but what makes Tim Drake's time unique is in 1993 he would get a run about him and him alone that would run for nearly 20 years. This run would be an exploration of Tim's growing insecurities and conflicts told through his single adventures about being Robin. Of course, this had a plot explanation because this took place after the Nightfall storyline in which Bane broke Batman's back, and in his stead, Bruce left John Paul Valley, who didn't think so highly of Robin. And so Robin was given his own solo adventures away from this new Batman and forced to take the mantle of Gotham's protection alone. But this initial conception only lasted about 9 of the run's initial issues, which left a pretty big question. What was a story about Robin alone going to be about? Even with Bruce back under the cowl, I think an opportunity presented itself to validate the very concern that sprung Tim's rise. What is the purpose of a Robin, and what makes an interesting storyline for a hero that's just a sidekick? You see, unlike teen heroes of the time, namely our favorite web crawler, Robin hadn't existed outside the space of a Detective Comics issue or a teen book like the Teen Titans, and so it became a combined Venn diagram of young adult fiction mixed with low-stakes superhero action that we commonly call ground-level superheroes, heroes that can't quite handle the cosmic-level threats coming to Earth, but they're striving to do their best in the tiny quadrant that they can oversee. Although I want to give a giant caveat here. Look, this run I'm about to talk some sugar about is not always so kind. To put it bluntly, Chuck Dixon's writing on the craft level is pretty tight, but his opinions and approach to writing teen drama is at very best simplistic moralization, and at very worst, racist and misogynistic. I'm not going to go through all the examples, or else I just have to talk about 90s comic book writing at the time, but just take my word for it. But a 40-year-old white cis man's opinions on the youths aside, Robin the Boywonder is one of, if not the most popular sidekick in comics history. And so from the very first pages of Tim suiting up, he is posed with the insecurity and question, am I worthy to be Robin? Unlike Dick and Jason, who through a matter of circumstance Bruce adopted and trained into the ranks, Tim found Bruce and attempted to prove his worth. This was a choice he decided to make, and even though he's earned the title in Bruce's eyes, he's forced to confront the imposter syndrome of a position that was filled brilliantly, and one that was tragically ended. And even worse, when he's just gotten used to being Batman's sidekick, Batman has to go and get his back broken, leaving him as Robin alone. And with a Batman currently terrorizing the citizens of Gotham, Tim is stressed with an even greater need to be the light of goodness upon the city. Or in other words, he's going to need to become the best Robin that there has ever been. Which doesn't go particularly well. Robin is forced to be saved several times, he wrangles with mostly low-level villains, and he has, in his own words, back-to-back close calls, all while letting his relationships with his dad and then girlfriend dwindle. All around, Tim is overwhelmed, and the initial bit feeds into the idea that he isn't enough on his own, which is why he ends up teaming with Huntress and Spoiler. Spoiler. We'll get to you in a bit. And even when Bruce does get back under the cowl, his reliance on Robin creates a physical toll that brings Robin to exhaustion of falling asleep on his girlfriend, even sleeping in the middle of sneaking around. But exhausted as he is, he's able to show up just in time. His exhaustion goes unremarked, and Bruce affirms Tim in his role. And the thing that sticks with me is we see all of this from Robin's perspective. We see the quiet moments of contemplation and worry from Tim. We see him struggle constantly without Bruce, and almost struggle more when Bruce returns. It really characterizes Tim's vulnerability as someone scrambling and desperate for approval, which contrasts well with his methodical detective persona as Robin. And if that's not enough, they follow the small arc up with the 0 Hour, which allows him to meet Dick when he was Robin. An issue that Tim spends equal parts gushing over seeing Dick in action, and loathing over his own inferiority. And the overall approach just feels both sincere and informed. Both at the time and even now, Dick has always been characterized as idyllic, and the history is present and available for readers. Dick isn't just someone made up, he's a hero with over 40 years of history, he's the founder of the Teen Titans, and both the readers and Tim know this, which allows Tim's insecurities to have a place in both abstract and tangibility. There's a reason they call it the Bat Family. His insecurities feel very familiar to a familial drama interweaving with teen anxiety and comic history. Since his points of comparison are both an unrealistic dream and a horrifying reflection, Tim can't even begin to perceive himself as Robin and must separate these two parts of himself to compensate, a fact that will cause strife in his personal relationships leading up to a breakup with his girlfriend, the death of one of his friends, and constant tension with his father. All of this working to give Tim a sense of identity both in and out of the mask, allowing him to have both a realistic drama born from the fact that his dual life stems from the Bat Family and Batman storylines. You know, storylines known and credited for their ominous and somber overtones. Tim's run has some real fun moments of romance, silly villains, and skateboarding, but Tim's relationship with his dual identity isn't ever so easily solved. In fact, I dare say the writers made a decision to put Tim in a more grim tone by the end of his comic. The first big turning moment is when Tim fails to save someone he was angry with, and unlike Bruce and Batman comics at the time, Tim spends issues afterwards filled with regret and remorse about how his emotions failed him. A beat interrogated by Tim, he states consistently that he doesn't want to emotionally close himself off like Bruce does, yet by the end of the run he states, I don't know if there's any other way. This was the merit he earned the cape and boots with, but now after being Robin for so long, he struggles with maintaining the same hopeful air. Yet he's found himself trapped because he also knows he can't abandon the role, or Batman won't have a Robin. It creates a cycle of guilt and responsibility fitting of a teenage hero, yet not missing the complexity of his mentor. There's a reason this run is called Robin. Tim does not aspire to be the Batman, and very rarely does he express an interest in doing so. This run for both a meta and surface level text is about the importance of that identity as a hero, which is why the run is bookended with 2 moments of Tim without Bruce present, and why in those final splash pages there's no bat in the sky, but a giant R. Although sadly, Tim's tragedy would only continue, for in the span of 3 months he would lose his father, his best friend Superboy, and his long-term love interest Stephanie Brown. A change that is seen by him changing his costume, nearly succumbing to Ra's al Ghul's influence, and even having a whole issue dedicated to helping him, and helping others, with their depression. I can't cover all these relationships, or else this video would just be way too long, so I'm going to cover my favorite, Stephanie Brown, the Spoiler. because, well, she's kind of just a perfect foil for Tim to bounce off and befriend for his solo adventures. On the pure temperament level, her jovial, hammy atmosphere contrasts well with Tim's attempt at a serious front, and her playful teasing is just poignant enough to both get a laugh and cause some reflection on Tim's behalf. If anything, it's Stephanie's commentary that causes Tim to start being critical of Batman's outlook. They genuinely feel like two friends and characters who have a lot to learn from each other. Contrary to any of their mentors who all maintain a hyper-competent facade, Tim and Steph are, well, not that. They mess up in front of each other a lot and on more than one occasion need to save each other, which may just be fun heroes and love interest behavior, but on the emotional level it allows them both to be vulnerable and honest with each other, as they are both two kids who have high things to aspire to. And so when Stephanie is presumed dead, Tim loses someone who understood him as, well, Robin in all his complexities, someone that didn't see him as a protege or a kid brother, but an equal. Honestly, I think it's pointed that for years, both in and out of comicsverse, Tim doesn't have another serious love interest, and when he does, it feels like it's just meant to complicate Stephanie's return, because boy was he happy to see her. But this run, as I said, seemed interested in taking Tim in a more gloomy direction, because towards the finale, Tim is faced with a whole lineup of villains that would be hired by Stephanie under Batman's orders. Most of them Tim is able to handle, with the exception of his long-term rival, Ulysses the General, an alt-right fascist masquerading as anarchy to bring destruction to Gotham because of his war obsession. Superficially contrasting them as Ulysses sacrifices his family for the thrill of destruction, while Tim loses his family in an attempt to keep everyone safe. But more importantly, his final argument with Stephanie gets at something specific. After arguing with her about her intentions, Tim admits that Stephanie accomplished what Batman wanted, a better Robin. And I think in this run, that's been critical of Batman and taken Robin in a sadder direction, is meant to illuminate that through Batman's indoctrination, Tim has become a mini Bruce Wayne, a manipulator who takes calculated risks for a greater good, someone who's beginning to close himself off emotionally to cope with his pain because that is what Bruce perceives as a better Robin, a plan facilitated by the person he was in love with. And so the once earnest boy who set out to be the best version of his heroic identity is left conflicted. And nowhere is that more poignant than the last person Tim interacts with being Nightwing, the original Boywonder, congratulating him on his skills and attempting to console him, but Tim chooses to refer to Dick by Nightwing, for he brushes him off and swings away, committing to his identity as some new version of a solo Robin. A conclusion fitting for a young hero whose storyline is about maturity, your ideals being thrown into question, and your worries validated. If anything, the way it ends feels indicative of the metatextual analysis going throughout Tim's whole run. The authors who wrote Tim explored the dimensions of a sidekick, while validating the unique identity that Tim had. For this Bleaker ending, I think, gets that Tim becoming more like Batman is losing sight of what made Robin a hero. Sad as that might be, Tim's original push is correct, even if he grapples with this insecurity still. And this isn't the end of Tim's growth or maturity, for he would don the title Red Robin, amend his relationship with Stephanie, hug his best friend, and apologize for his harsher tone. This merely represents the end of his teen years as Robin, which in my opinion feels like he's grown and changed and still remained in conversation with the history and lore that made his run so compelling. And I feel like I want to reference Tim's quote I began this whole video with, "You never made me Robin, I made myself." This is Tim in a nutshell, the boy wonder who saw Robin as a true standalone hero, and his pursuit to prove himself created an elevation of the moniker, a storyline not held back by previous conceptions but amplifying the perceptions of what a Robin could and should be. And comics are messy, this thesis will not be consistent in 20 years of publication and retcons, but I think there's a reason Tim's remembered so fondly, and call it inconsistent, call it exploratory, but he sure showcased a wide range of storylines for the boy wonder. Or maybe I'm just overthinking this. After all, I am also the third child of many siblings, I may have worn the tights myself, and I think I just really wanted to shine some appreciation on Tim as he feels like he's the Robin who's looked past frequently. Especially when Bendis decides to give him some ugly-ass suit and the worst hero name imaginable. But, hey, I sure am open to him possibly coming out as an LGBTQ+ superhero. But I suppose time will tell what will happen to our favorite third boy wonder. But for now, that's all I got. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and I will hopefully see you soon.